6 o'clock. I don't have a gavel, but I call this meeting to order. Everybody please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, roll call, please.
Mrs. Chamberlain,
Here.
Mrs. Saylor, Mrs. Saylor.
Didn't hear you, Judy.
Yeah.
Hi. Mrs. Corey,
She's muted. She's here.
okay.
Here.
Mr. Dilks,
Here.
okay. Colonel Hensky,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Lepsis we know is absent, Dr. McCloy,
Here.
and Mrs. Shoemaker.
Here.
Thank you.
In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, this is to announce that adequate notice of this meeting was given in the following manner. On January 8th, 2020, notice of this meeting was transmitted to the Burlington County Times and the Central Record, filed with the Township Clerk, and posted in the Office of the Business Administrator, Board Secretary. Additional notification was made on August 5th, 2020, in the Burlington County Times to inform the public that this meeting was rescheduled and will be held in a virtual format. Notification was also posted on both the district website and the district app. I direct the Business Administrator, Board Secretary to enter this statement into the minutes. Mission statement. And we'll have our first presentation for the Tabernacle Township School District Restart and Recovery Plan to reopen schools, presented by Mr. Bannon and Mrs. Gallagher.
One quick second to share the screen. Can you all see the presentation slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it shows up differently on my screen, so I just want to make sure everyone's seeing the correct thing. So obviously, tonight we're going to talk about our restart and reopening plan for the upcoming school year. First question, obviously, is how do we even get here? So obviously, we know there's a lot of things that have happened in the world since the springtime. And according to the state of New Jersey, we obviously have to put forward a restart and recovery plan for each district. Is required to do that. The state did reissue to the road back that all states or all districts within the state had to read, follow, and open up and have a large number of areas that they had to cover in their plan. And to make sure we could do that, we did a number of surveys. Our most recent survey asked our parents two scheduling options, very importantly. Would you want the every other day, half day, or a more static day schedule, meaning that one group of students will be coming to school every week on Mondays and Wednesdays. Another group of school will be coming to school every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then the Friday would alternate, creating more of a static option for those families. 73.9% of the parents that took our survey, of over 506 people that did that, chose the option A, which was the more static day schedule. So we started working forward in terms of our plans of building that into there. We also asked in terms of how many people at that point in time would choose a virtual option. 18.2% of our families chose that. And the other thing that is also very important for us is in part of our plan, we are trying not to lock parents into a long-term decision of choosing virtual schooling. The idea behind that is we want to have families be able to come back. We, look at in-person education as our primary function of school. So that's why we wanted to have that option. Some schools were looking to locking families in there for marking period, semester, or a full year. Our plan, if people do choose to begin the school year in a remote setting, it'll only be for October, which we'll go into. Or I'm sorry, until October, we'll have the decision to return. We'll go more into that slightly soon. In terms of transportation as well, we had, if you see here, 47.2% of people said that they knew right off the bat that they were going to definitely need our transportation services. Other people are undecided, and 18.6 said no. And part of it, from looking at some of the comments, and people have sent some emails to us as well, is part of the determination is they're also waiting to find out what our alphabetical split was going to be for the students, because some of the people that they were going to possibly transport with, they realized could be at a different part of the alphabet with them. So I thought that was very understanding as to why people were talking about it, perhaps not working for them.
In addition to our surveys, we also had reopening committees. We had 6 committees that consisted of staff members, Board of Education members, parents, and administrators. The 6 committees consisted of kindergarten through 5th grade instruction, 6th through 8th grade instruction. We had special education, related arts, health, and social and emotional learning. We will also be starting the committees again after we have implementing our restart plan, and we want to thank everybody for their time with the committees meetings.
What will this year look like now that we've had that determination? So obviously, as I mentioned before, based on the feedback from the surveys, we are moving forward with the half-day alternating hybrid schedule. So one of the big things in the roadback was the idea that we knew from the beginning that we had to figure out a way to limit the capacity of the buildings, and most importantly, the classrooms. So really, they talked about trying to make sure you're meeting social distancing requirements. What does that mean? That means that you're trying to have students that are 6 feet away from each other in classrooms at all times. You're trying to limit the flow of different operations in buildings. You're trying to limit the amount of time perhaps that people are even in the buildings, which is why we're also looking to eliminate lunches in school. We'll offer lunch, we'll get more into that, but not necessarily have them eat in school. Trying to reduce the amount of time for physical education and recess, again, especially with the new governor's mandate. That's more time that students are not masked, which seems to be a bit of a health issue as well from everything we're hearing. We're also trying to do this model because it would allow for more in-person instruction as an every other day model. We're having more contact with the students on a more frequent basis. It also allows time for the teachers by doing a half day for them to educate the students that are in the building and the students that are not in the building, for those that are choosing a remote option or those in the hybrid model who it's not their in-person day. And also by having the students in school in this frequency model, it enables for us to have more cell supports. Cell is social emotional learning. And we want to try to make sure we're meeting the goals, because obviously, as we know, this whole situation, we're in a pandemic, we are still experiencing it. For those of you who do not know, last week, Burlington County was actually named as one of the county hotspots in the area as well. So we are still obviously in that time frame, and we know that there's a variety of reasons that people have experienced some semblance of trauma. So one of our big emphasis is trying to find more ways to support our students, staff, and family during this time.
So our hybrid schedule will consist of 2 cohorts. There's the first cohort, which is the blue cohort, which will be Tuesday and Thursday in-person instruction. And then we have the gold cohort, which is Monday and Wednesday in-person instruction. Fridays will be rotated. And then we have to change one date, March 19th, for the balance of days that have 90 days for each cohort. We have to change that to a gold day on March 19th. The hybrid schedule consists of a combination of in-person and online instruction. It allows for personalization to meet each individual student's needs. We want to implement tools that are consistent across the board to help our parents, our students, and our staff, and it allows for flexible scheduling as well. And we want to also follow the guidelines to maintain the 6 feet social distancing and provide everyone health and safety as well for our students.
So the in-person schedule we're looking here is we'll have 2 different start times. Obviously, K-5 is because of the combining of buildings anyway, it actually works out well that we're able to have the staggered schedule in the buildings. So one of the recommendations in the roadback was when you can do so, to have staggered times. That way all students aren't coming in towards one sort of entrance points during the day. So we'll end up having, as you see here, K-5 will have 8:45 to 12:45 for in-person instruction, while 6 through 8 will be an 8 to 12 situation. Students are not going to be required to sign in virtually for additional classes on the days that they're in person for instruction. They could have online assignments, things like that on the Google Class page. But one of the feedback points from the committees was to try to not overwhelm the kids where they're already in school for the 4 hours, then coming home, having lunch, recess, whatever the case may be, and logging back on. So there could be additional times for extensions of learning, but not necessarily synchronous learning opportunities on those days. When I say synchronous, that means necessarily they're sitting down for a live instruction point with the teacher in front of them on that time, since they've had that in the morning. And again, that provides more opportunities for those teachers in the afternoon to provide that points for the kids that are either hybrid or remote. We're also working to make sure that related arts is being provided on the days that they're in person, because obviously some of those activities are much easier to do when the students are in school. Phys ed is a different animal because the minute requirements have not been waived by the state of New Jersey when it comes to physical education. That'll be something that'll be both in person and online that we still are showing that we are meeting their minutes required. We also have been working well with YMCA for a before and after care program for schools out that will be available for students and families on days that they are scheduled for in-person learning as well too. And that will be running this year out of OMS.
So remote learning days. Students are required to check in virtually within the first hour of school starting. So whatever their start time is, within that hour, they have to check in. Teachers will post lessons or tutorials and assignments on Google Classroom. Remote learning will be provided both synchronously, and as Mr. Bannon just said, that's when it's live working with the teacher, and asynchronously, where they're working independently on their own. We're going to implement the flipped classroom model. And the flipped classroom model is basically the reverse of the traditional of the model. You're basically watching the videos and the lessons at home, answering few questions, and then when you come to school, you dive deep into those lessons. It's more individualized, so the teacher can work one-on-one with the students, more hands-on. It's a more collaborative approach, so we can really problem solve together in the classroom. Teachers will be available to assist students throughout the day. So we're going to have teachers throughout the day where students can check in on certain periods. Teacher will be provided synchronous instruction in the afternoon. And then we will have a full-time learning schedule as well, and that's to come in the next few weeks.
So I know one of the things we heard a lot is when we met in our groups was about the experience that people had during the springtime. And again, I know that kind of soured some people on the idea of remote learning, but again, I'd like to remind people that wasn't really remote learning to true fidelity. And we like to think of it as teaching and learning in a crisis just happen to be doing in an online setting. So a lot of the things we're looking into is in terms of how we're going to make sure we're providing the high quality of assessment or instruction, rather, looking at some of the power standards to making sure we're addressing things. So, when we're with our students, we're getting our most impactful instruction. That we're going to be working with our teachers to make sure they understand how to better utilize the tools. Again, remember when we had that shutdown point in March, it was basically a light switch moment where people were used to always the model of being traditional instruction when you're in school to then everything running through a virtual setting. So people, students, teachers, and parents were thrust into a situation where they were required to use tools for the first time for that matter. So we're trying to make sure that we find the tools that, again, that are the most beneficial. So we can use the most consistent points of instruction and train our staff on how to use them. And again, as I mentioned, as you see at the bottom here as well, it's not just our staff that need training to make sure they're using and understanding how to do these tools. It's also going to be the parents, and we're going to work on creating parent videos as well, so they understand how to use Google Classroom and some of their tools that their students will be using when they're at home. We're also working, as Ms. Gallagher mentioned, in terms of the use of the flipped classroom model. And again, one of the big feedback points we got from multiple parent surveys and also in our groups as well was the request to return back to traditional grading. And that is definitely something we feel, based on the model we have in place, that there's no reason for us to resort to the pass fail that we ended the school year with due to some equity issues, and we can go back to a true traditional alphabetical grading or numerical grading depending on the grade level.
Special education needs. So our self-contained special education students will be in every day for full days. The preschool schedule is going to be maintained as is. We will have received additional supports with small group through virtual, and then individual needs will be discussed as per student by the child study team.
So as I mentioned before, one of our focuses this year is going to be social emotional learning. It's going to be something we're going to try to incorporate throughout our lessons. It's not going to necessarily be a new subject area, but trying to make sure that everything we're doing is infused with this idea that we're doing these different multiple check-ins, feedback points, to make sure we're assessing where our students are, that they're doing proper self-care, that our staff is as well, and trying to provide more resources. And it's one of the things that I think our guidance team and our child study team did a great job with in the springtime was the weekly survey they were sending out to families to kind of find out who needed help and how we can support them. And that's the kind of thing we're looking to continue to find more ways to continue to support our teachers, our students, and our families. We'll be doing some more training on this as well. But this is definitely one of our big points of emphasis. As I mentioned before, we do understand that this is a crisis situation, that people have experienced some semblance of trauma through this, and we want to make sure we're able to support them along the way.
So our lunches will be a grab-and-go daily style lunches. All students will be able to order lunches online through a form. We're going to have lunches delivered at the end of the day to the classrooms, and then the remote learning students can pick up their lunches in the middle school. We're also going to provide an option where you can bring home 2 days lunches. So for example, if you're in the blue cohort, you come in on a Tuesday, you can bring home Tuesday and Wednesday rather than coming back to school and pick up your lunches.
And lunches will be available, like Ms. Gallagher mentioned. Really important, I think, to make sure that even if you're a remote learning student, you could still order your lunch and come pick it up. And more information will be coming on that as well. Electronic devices obviously are a very important thing we're talking about here with hybrid learning. We're talking about remote learning. We need to make sure our students have devices in their hands. And we will have devices available for every single student when they're in school, and certainly have the availability as well that for all K-8 students that they can also have a device that would travel with them to school and to home as well. If a student is taking that lone device as it stands right now, we don't have enough devices to say you can have a device home and school, so that device would have to travel back and forth with that. And we're working with our IT department to have some more information to figure out that exact schedule. And as soon as we have that done, for those of you that do need additional devices, we'll make that available to you.
So what measures will be put in place to keep students and staff healthy and safe? First is social distancing. Desks will be spaced out 6 feet apart as much as possible. Desks will all be faced the same direction. As you see in the picture, that is an example of one of our classrooms right now. In rooms at large tables, students will sit 6 feet apart, and then we also must maintain social distancing at the bus stops as well.
So daily screenings is one of the areas that's actually kind of interesting, because there was a lot of talk at first of requiring just one type of scanning, in that case of being the temperature scanning. But a lot of the guidance, and this is one of the things that we're seeing throughout the development of this plan, guidance changes at a moment's notice. So a lot of the things the CD has talked about is making sure that we're not relying simply on just temperature checks, that it's more the visual screening. You're not just doing something, because I guess the idea behind the temperature screening is being its sole point in the morning, would be that people can take Tylenol, Advil, and mask some of the signs and symptoms of it that way. So they're looking for multiple signs, multiple symptoms. And the idea we talked here about additional statement of assurance. We're working with our student information system of OnCourse to see if they can have a statement of assurance embedded into the system every day that a parent would click onto and basically say that my child is not showing any of the signs or symptoms of COVID. Therefore, that child can come to school without a problem. If that is not something that OnCourse can develop, we are working then at the backup plan of a Google form. And if we can, our ideal measure is to have this actually as a link on our app. That way it's something that parents are already used to going to and make it easier for them to do. But again, like I said, this is one of those areas that we are still waiting for additional guidance because of how quickly the CDC, or how recently the CDC has updated it. And we're going to work accordingly with that. Speaking of recent updates, on Monday, as you all saw, the governor, I'm willing to bet most people saw, at least the governor made a decree to clarify some aspects of the road back. Before, it was implying, or interpreted, I should say, that if people were socially distant in a classroom and the students were then seated 6 feet away once they were in that room, that students could remove their masks. Governor Murphy made sure it was very clear on Monday to all school districts that that is not the intention behind the plan, that students will have to maintain the use of masks during the day, social distance or not. And again, I want to make sure this is very clear. That does not mean that then you don't have to be socially distanced. It's masks and social distance are the recommendations or requirements that we have to fall within as well. So staff as well has to wear the masks. Visitors have to wear a mask, which we'll go into. There are exceptions to the rule that are outlined in the New Jersey Department of Education's guidelines. If you feel that your child may fall under those exceptions, it's something that we can talk about in terms of the physician's notes and so on that have to be within there. But for the most part, students will be wearing masks. Now, one of the things I will make sure you know is that in the new updated guidelines, there is talk, it did mention something about mask breaks. That is coming directly from the governor's office. We have reached out to the Department of Health so they can explain to us more about the safest manner in which those can be conducted and how they can be trained. Like one of the points they've talked about when they say about people removing the masks is to make sure you're removing them from the sides around your ears and not touching the mask itself, which could further contaminate it. But we're hoping that the Department of Health in Burlington County will give us some more specific guidelines in terms of their best practices and recommendations that we as a school can then implement.
Hand washing. So we encourage the washing and sanitizing of hands whenever possible. Hand sanitizer will be in each classroom throughout the building and on the buses as well. And then we have signage to be around the school about proper hygiene and hand washing techniques.
So one of the big ways that we're also trying to limit the spreading of this contagion is by limiting the movement of students in the hallway. So our K-5 students will be staying in their classroom, and people, if they have a related art, that related art will come to them. 6, 7, 8 is a little bit different. A lot of it has to do with also the certification issues with different classes that way. So those students will be traveling, but obviously they'll be traveling within smaller groups to begin with, and trying as much as we can to keep those students. So the students may move to the different classes, but they're still going to be cohorted as much as possible when they go to that next location. We're also going to make sure we have signs in the hallways so students understand when they're walking the hallway to always stay to the right side of the hallway to create that distance points, and reminding them as well to stay, if they can, in 6 feet apart in a single file line as they're traveling through the halls.
Our transportation. So masks must be worn at all times on the buses. Windows will be open when possible. You know, if the weather's not good, they can't be, but when it's nice weather, we're going to open them up. Students will load from the back to the front. So when they get on, whoever's the first stop will go all the way to the back, and it will continue to the front. And then when students exit, it will start from the front to the back. Sanitizing wipes will be available on the buses. It'll be clean. The buses will be cleaned throughout the day, and social distancing must be maintained at the bus stops, or masks must be worn.
If you're wondering as to why we mentioned sanitizing hand wipes here, not hand sanitizer, it's because the hand sanitizer itself actually contains alcohol as recommended, which is a flammable substance. So the recommendation that's come to us is obviously not to put flammable substances on our school buses. So by using the hand wipes, we can still make sure that the students are being sanitary with not putting them at further risk because of a flammable substance being on the bus. Additional health procedures are going to be in place as well. So the recommendation is, or the requirement is, if any student or staff member is not feeling well, that they should be staying home. We don't want to take a chance on anyone getting sick, and that's a big part of it as well. If a student has signs or symptoms of COVID-19, we are going to have isolation rooms located in both of our buildings that we can put students into, and we're going to be calling parents with the expectation that the students picked up as soon as absolutely possible. It's very important that we're doing our emergency contact list this year, that they are updated, that parents are providing additional points on there. That way they have somebody who is local and can pick up the student as quickly as possible. Similarly, if a staff is exhibiting signs or symptoms of COVID, we are going to be sending them home to a doctor immediately.
Visitors. Visitors will not be permitted in the school without an appointment. They must have an appointment. All visitors must be temperature screened and complete a statement of assurance prior to the entry of the building. All visitors must wear non-vented masks unless doing so would be detrimental to the visitor's health or if the visitor is under 2 years of age. Hands must be sanitized prior to entry, and virtual meetings will be held with parents whenever possible.
So big point is obviously cleaning and disinfecting as well. We're going to be doing some enhanced cleaning procedures. We've also purchased some additional things in terms of electrostatic sprayers and hydroxyl generators. I'll go more into detail on those in a second. We're also going to be hiring 2 additional part-time custodians to help with the cleaning, in particular disinfecting areas, and trying to make sure that the high-touch surfaces are one of our big points of emphasis when they're walking around the building, doorknobs, things like that people will be touching. And trying to make sure that all the products we have are on the EPA's list for verified kill claims of the coronavirus or COVID-19. I mentioned the electrostatic sprayers and hydroxyl generators. You know more about those. The electrostatic sprayers will be used to disinfect the buses in a very quick and efficient manner to kill everything that's in there. It can also be used for different classroom places, playgrounds, things like that. The hydroxyl generators are these basically what they call is a crash cart type of situation, that if there was a hotspot or something that was concerned about in a classroom, you can put that in there, and by leaving it in for approximately 5 hours in a classroom location, it would basically restore that room to almost a hospital grade situation. Obviously, if the contagion was believed to be in a larger area, we would have to possibly put both of them in that room for a longer amount of time, but it would do a lot of cleaning and disinfecting to those rooms to enable them to be used the next day.
Additional restrictions at this time, field trips and assemblies will not be scheduled. If it's virtual, it's fine for the field trips. Extracurricular activities will only be approved if done virtually as well, and interscholastic and intramural sports will not be offered at this time.
The key phrase there is "at this time." As things develop, as we've seen, things can happen very quickly. Just today, for instance, the governor released additional Q&A information for all school districts in terms of the road back, even though that came out in June. We finally got a Q&A of some key points that people were asking questions on. And like I mentioned before, on Monday, he made additional statements about masks. So we do expect additional guidance points to keep on coming out our way, and we will adjust and adapt the plan to make sure we're meeting the needs outlined from the Department of Health and the DOE as quickly as we can as well. And we thank you for your time and the presentation, and I'm sure the board may have some questions.
Thank you.
Sean, I do actually have one. I know you mentioned that in-person days, the related arts are going to be done for the in-person days while they're there in the school. What are we doing for the kids that are going to be virtual the whole time? Are they still going to have related arts?
They are. We're going to make sure they have related arts. We're working on that part of the schedule now, Kevin. So one of the things we're playing around with is trying to look at the related arts schedule to make sure we can have that opportunity. I don't want to have anyone who is in remote learning to not have related arts or not have those things. So that's one of the pieces. If you noticed our schedule, our presentation did not include the specifics in terms of this is the exact remote schedule for that. That's a piece of it. We're trying to look at some of those points to make sure we're giving those students the full education they deserve as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
This is Vicky. I have a couple of things. What about the cleansing of books, library books, and reusable manipulatives?
So in terms of the library books, I believe that the recommendation has been that books can be borrowed, but you're then supposed to have it for, I think it's like about 48 hours, I think, before you lend it out again. So they can still be done. But our thought process there for the most part is that the librarians or media center specialists would go to classrooms with select books that could be available, loan them out and go that way. So we'll have more control over that matter. In terms of the manipulatives, the recommendation in the road back is to limit the use of shared tools, supplies, manipulatives as much as possible. So if we do have to disinfect certain things, as again, we have limited amount of certain supplies, and it could also be in terms of even a gym equipment, health, physical education equipment, that the item would then be disinfected before it was shared again.
Okay. My other question is the use of the building after hours. Is that off the books for now?
The recommendations from the Burlington County Department of Health, when we met with them, was to not allow that. They really said that you want to put the point of emphasis on the students of maintaining of who's in the building and making sure the building is as clean and disinfected as possible for those students. So we are going to have, as I mentioned before, the use of the YMCA Schools Out program for the students that are in school on that day. But that program usually ends at 6 p.m. and that would enable us to make sure that any classroom or any issue we had, we could put in those crash carts and provide those opportunities to make sure that those areas are fully disinfected before the students arrive in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Sean?
Yes, Steve.
So a couple things. One, what if a child is identified as having COVID or having showing symptoms, or a teacher, we're going to notify everybody in the classroom or call the parents in the classroom, correct?
It actually goes down to, as soon as we know it, a lot of it falls to the county in that case, where their contact tracing model would be in place, and they would tell us the next case of proceeding. So we have to have a list of who's in the rooms during the time, let them know what's going on, and then they would tell us, here's what we have to do for the contact tracing. A lot of it actually is going to end up falling on the county because they may end up going different things that way too. But both of our nurses were contact tracers over the summer. There are things that we're going to have to notify people. It's going to be a little bit different than some issues in the past, let's say, where notifications could not have been done quickly because we have to obviously make sure that people are aware of this. One of the things they talk to us a lot about too is by doing the cohorting type model we're recommending and trying to limit things, that actually provides the opportunity at times, and again, this is depending on what the Department of Health would look at a situation in terms of this spread of the contagion, where they could say that this class and this teacher or this group would quarantine just in case, but it may not be a whole school shutdown event. And that was one of the points that they mentioned to us as well.
All right, cool. And the second question I have is, so if the kids bring anything into the school, they're bringing it out, or they're going to be able to leave it in a locker?
Good question. We ideally want to have things brought back and forth as much as possible, because one of the things that we want to be prepared for is we don't know any moment in time if the governor made a call and said everything's going back to remote. We want to make sure the kids have everything that they need to go back in that situation. So we are working, especially with OMS, that we would have the students be able to use their lockers, and what we were going to do is stagger it so that you would not be next to another student with the same day as you. So it'd be a blue, a gold, so on. But really enable them to keep their personal effects in there. That way, also not bringing them into the classroom and try to limit what they're carrying that way too.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sean, I know you mentioned earlier on that you were going to discuss the a family that chooses entirely remote, and that would happen to October. Could you explain that process, and then from October to whenever this ends,
Absolutely.
the process, so that everyone knows the expectations?
Sure. So the idea behind this was, a lot of feedback was to not lock people into something. Because again, as we mentioned before, schools are primarily originally were designed for in-person instruction, obviously. So we know that people are somewhat of a fluid situation, and we felt that strongly that we didn't want to lock people into these long-term commitment of remote. We felt the first month was adequate, because that also gives people the experience when they are seeing the remote, if it's meeting their needs, if they want to switch back, and we can accommodate them there. So really, when you make that decision, which as it stands right now, we're looking to have a new survey put out. I know we have another people that said they wanted to commit. We'll have something new that's going to be rolling out next week. We're trying to have people make that determination by the end of the week, so we can better figure out some of those things and put those plans in place, especially because it's going to be trying to get the devices into the hands of the full remote families before the school year begins and things like that we want to accommodate. But what we're going to do then at that point in time is that child will be in remote learning until October 1st. After that time, if they give us at least a week's notice, they could then come back on the first and third Monday of a month. We're trying to create those rolling points again, because we don't know if this is going to change, and we don't know in terms of COVID spread. If it gets better and people feel more comfortable having their kids come back, that's why we're trying to provide that opportunity. And if we want to make sure as well that we're not creating it's called a yo-yoing situation. When we're looking in terms of the remote learning, it's for the health issue. It should not be that a parent is trying to say, I want remote learning for this week because I'm going on a vacation. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not the idea behind the remote learning and any intent from the school and from the state. It's really because they want to provide parents who do not feel comfortable sending their kids into school in this situation to have that opportunity.
And if there's some sort of a very extreme situation that comes up, parents can contact you directly.
Absolutely. They contact me directly, and I'm going to be very willing to able to sit down parents, because again, it's a very tough situation, understandable entirely, and we want to be responsive to the needs of the parents and our students.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Do any other board members have any questions or comments?
You have a question for Sean.
This is Dan. I have two, if I could.
Hold on, Dan. Be a gentleman. Let Gail go first.
You betcha.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, Sean, has any decision been made yet on the kindergarten assessment? And if it's found that if a kindergartner does need the extra help, how is that going to work remotely?
In terms of you're talking about the screening model?
The screening, and then if they're identified they need help, the concern is them handling the remote part of their education, the
Sure.
virtual.
Well, again, that goes back to one, we have the MAP testing in place already that we've used for a number of years, which can be used as a screening model. We are looking as well, we've talked to some other districts to find out some other tools they put in place to provide some additional screening information beyond that, and are trying to get some more feedback points to see if any of them would be superior to than just the data points we're going to get from MAP in the beginning of the school year from those students.
I'm talking about kindergarten.
So am I. That we were talking about the districts that said that they can
Oh,
use.
you would give them the map to, okay.
That was one of the things we talked to school districts about, that they said that that's one of the things they're looking to do this year, even though it necessarily wasn't done in the past right away, is to use that as an initial screening point to get a baseline number on the students, and transitioning it to the use that way. Again, I know that wasn't how it was done in the past, but again, people are trying to react accordingly. So if a student is needed, if we find we need additional supports, if we have to do something, there are supports obviously provided in the classroom that we can make those adjustments ultimately. And if it becomes a situation where we need to add more, we can find some ways to potentially add more on the individual needs of the students.
Okay.
Okay. Dan?
Thank you. Sean and Melissa, thank you both for presenting that. Can one of you comment a little bit more on the use of the isolation room, how that will be used, how that will be cleaned and turned around, should it be needed again, those kinds of things?
Sure. So the current guidance from the DOE or DOE/DOH/whatever is ideally that you're leaving that room sit for 24 hours after it's used, or as close to that as possible. One of the reasons they mention that is that a person is sitting in that room for a long period of time, based on the belief that it is an airborne contagion, that you'd want to have time for it to fully settle in that room. Now, as I know it's mentioned, it was a little bit different when they talked about the use of the hydraulic generators, the crash cart, so to speak, in the other rooms. That so far is not, we have to find out if that's something that would be allowable there and speed up the process for that room. Not every school district has that, but we're also looking at creating additional rooms for those in each building. That if it became a situation where you had multiple students on a given day, that we're not just saying, okay, I'm putting you into this room that some other student we know was potentially had this illness, we're going to put them in that same situation. So we're trying to identify, even though both schools started off with one isolation room, we're now trying to identify at least, if we can, 2 additional isolation rooms in the buildings. Now, obviously, it comes down to, at some point in time, there's a space limitation. We can't just say, have 100 kids in the building, here's 100 new isolation rooms. But we're trying to at least accommodate and find ways to create additional spots as secondary rooms.
All right, thank you. Second question is
Dan, on that.
regarding.
Dan, on
Sorry?
that, just since you asked the question, hey, Sean, who's gonna you be in the isolation room with if a student?
The rooms that we're choosing, it's a very good question, Steve, or rooms that have window doors. So it wouldn't necessarily be that we're putting somebody in that room with them, but that the person could be outside that room, keeping an eye on the individual.
Okay, I defer back to.
Second question had to do with the before school and after school program. Can you talk about how that may change, or will it not change?
In terms of what, Dan? I'm not sure.
How will that be offered and administered, and still the same hours for people? And
Sure. Yep. From our conversation so far with the YMCA is that they believe it can be offered the same type of hours. Again, like I said, it would be the students that are in school on that given day would have access to that. They have their own requirements in terms of cohorting, in terms of distancing, that they also have to follow under. So before, when you had a student for aftercare, if students said, hey, I want to go into the gym, or I want to go there, they would let somebody know. They have to pod or cohort their kids as well and have them stick together under different restrictions. So once they know how many students are going to be in to the groups, then they can pod them accordingly, and they'd have them travel if they would be. And again, as I mentioned before, it's going to be in OMS. So the 2 areas we designated with them inside our building would be the APR, the all-purpose room, and the gymnasium, and they could have the students travel between them. And they also like the idea of the all-purpose room because it enables them to go outside to the fields and quick access points. And then parents at that point in time for pickup would come to the rear of the building behind the all-purpose room. And we've had conversations with them as well about installing some sort of a video doorbell, kind of like a Ring type of system, where that way they could see the person that's coming outside and make sure it's secure when they're handing over the student to their parent as well, without that person coming into the building for any reason as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board members? Going once, going twice. Okay, at this time, we're going to open up the meeting, the Zoom meeting, to public comment on agenda items only. At this time, I see there's about 127 people in attendance tonight. Because of that, I'm going to limit the total amount of time for comments to no more than 60 minutes. When you are addressed, please state your name and address. Please keep your comments limited to a 3-minute or less. And if you don't have a chance tonight to ask your question, please feel free to email the board members, or Mr. Bannon actually would probably be your go-to guy at the district email if you don't get your chance tonight. So at this time, I'm going to open up the floor for public comments. Oh, you know what? I'm going to hold on to that. Hold that thought. So when we were planning on having this meeting on Monday night, we had asked people who didn't feel comfortable coming out in public to email us their questions or comments. And I do have a list here If you are in attendance tonight and you would like to ask your question yourself when I read your name off, please just say you'd rather do it. I can hear you. If you don't say anything, I'm going to read the questions that were emailed first before public comments. Okay, anybody have a problem with that? Okay, I'm the first, and I apologize, I'm reading it off my iPad. Diane Morris, are you in attendance? Would you like to ask your own question, or would you like me to read it? Okay, not hearing her, I'm going to read her question. Has the district considered looping elementary students with their previous year's class and teacher? I think it would provide a small bit of consistency for them.
We do have some looping that will go on. It's not across the board, but there are some areas that we're able to do that. In some cases, it's a special education teacher traveling with the classes. In other cases, we do have a full classroom looping, but it's not something we're implementing across the board. One of the ideas behind that as well, as much as it can be good, we also know that how many different things we're throwing at people in a given year, and asking everyone to learn new curriculums, we also thought could be a very detrimental decision as well. So we're trying to balance that out.
Okay. Teresa Inaker, sorry. Are you here? Do you want to ask your question yourself? Not hearing her. I'm going to read her question. I'm sorry, I forgot the address. She is 18 Lake Road. Her comment is she supports a return to in-classroom, in-person instruction. Online instruction was not beneficial for her daughter, who is entering the 7th grade. Social skills, time management skills, focus and discipline are important skills better developed in the in-person environment. These were completely lacking in the online environment last year. Put the children first and bring them back to school. Thank you. Kelly Berlin, 11 Wimbledon Way. Are you in attendance? Do you want to ask your question?
You can ask my question.
Okay. Sorry. Will there be an orientation for incoming kindergartners, as well as the 2nd through 5th grade students who will be new to Olson Middle School prior to the first day of school?
That's the point we're still trying to work out if that's something that can be done in person or if it's something that will be virtual, but there will be some semblance of it, an orientation. It's just a matter of it will, like I said, will be an in-person orientation or virtual orientation.
Okay. Allison Brown, 1404 Route 206. Are you there? Okay, not seeing or hearing her. If a student teacher travels out of state, will there be a quarantine period? If a student or teacher's sorry, immediate family gets sick, what impact will it have on the class? If there is only half-day schedules 2 to 3 times a week, will specials be put to the side? And I would prefer my child to have instruction from the teacher, not a special. Will lockers be used? And will the children have to carry all their supplies back and forth from school?
I think we answered a number of those questions in the presentation. Right. The quarantine question in terms of if you're traveling out of state, yes, it is going to be something that we still have to fall within the guidelines that the governor has in place as well right now. So the recommendation certainly is going to be to all our staff to certainly not travel out of state, especially heading right before the school year. Otherwise, quarantine issues, might come into play, and there'll be more information being sent out to the staff next week about that specifically as they're looking to finalize their plans for the rest of the summer. In terms of the isolation points, in terms of if someone comes in sick at your house as well, a lot of that's going to be in conversations we're going to have, as I mentioned before, with the contact tracing with the the health department and information that they're giving us. It's my understanding that we should be receiving more information specifically from the health department on a number of these key points, that being one of them soon. But our county health department has not yet released some specific information that the county superintendents have requested yet.
Okay. Maria Schultzes, 298 Carranza Road. You there? Okay, not hearing from her. Please explain the rationale for switching every other day. Other schools are doing extended time between switch, like 2 days on and 1 day off for cleaning and then switch. Some are doing switch after 1 week intervals. There are safety benefits for extending the time period between switching. If you do group A for 1 week and then clean and have group B for the following week, this would decrease demand for students to switch between modalities, remote versus in class, which could be academically beneficial and could allow for any symptoms or issues to be identified during that week off.
So we also looked at the other way, that the longer amount of time we were preventing our students from being in the building. If it was a full week in particular, we threw that one out pretty quickly. We thought that's a long touch point, not to have contact with the kids. If there's an issue, they need additional help when they're in school, you're now not having that for at least a week. When it came down to the 2 days, I know some schools did what they called the AABB model. So in that instance, it would be one cohort would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was a virtual, and then Thursday, Friday. Again, that became now if a kid we're seeing them Monday, Tuesday, we're not seeing them to the following week. That's a longer stretch. And we were trying to, again, try to make sure that we can better assess the students and their needs social, emotionally, academically on a more frequent basis. And we thought that by doing the half days, we're providing our custodial staff plenty of time to disinfect the building, clean the areas, and make sure we're keeping things okay that way. So we had a lot of internal conversations as to what would be the best thing, and conversations with other districts, looking at some different models that people were implementing, and that was the one we thought was the most effective for our students.
I have a Leanne. I don't have a last name. 140 Brace Lane. Are you there? Okay, I'm going to read it. My son needs to be in school to learn virtual learning. My son needs to be in school to learn virtual learning is doing nothing but hurting these children. Masks should not be required if social distancing can be done, as these children do not need to be breathing in their own carbon monoxide, which is making people sick as well.
Well, the mask mandate obviously is something that comes directly from the governor. As we are a public entity, we have to go along with the mandates that come. And there's definitely even some science that would say that you're not breathing in your own during that time as well. In terms of the social distancing, in the remote learning aspect of it, again, as I went and said before, that remote learning in the spring is not necessarily what remote learning in the fall is going to look like. A lot of that was not just truly remote learning. It was teaching and learning in a crisis. It was a different circumstance, and we're having more time to look at the ways that we are doing things to provide more consistency of instruction across the models as well, too. For instance, one of the things we've had a lot of conversations with about was, especially, I'll use an example of a first grade classroom where we have 3 first grade teachers, and it could say that, one teacher is going to be constructing the videos or the lessons for ELA. One could be the math, one could be the science or whatever. And there could be sharing the videos that way. So again, providing more consistency. And in the case that anybody ever, was absent, lost time, those students could still move on with instructional points that they're getting from other teachers as well. And that would one of the things we've had a lot of conversations with about.
Lori Petrowski, 15 Lillian Street. Okay, for students with IEPs who didn't necessarily thrive during the previous remote semester, will there be extra help available to keep them on track on those remote days if both parents are working and no one will be home to monitor? With a rotating, hold on, almost done. With a rotating hybrid schedule, there is no way we can be able to adjust our work schedules.
Sure. In terms of the IEP situation, I'll address that one. That's one of the things that, as I mentioned before, that we are trying to tweak and looking at some different ways to create some flexible points into some teaching schedules, in particular when it comes to the meeting the IEP needs of the students in additional times. One of the things that actually ends up creating some interesting things is in this model in place of the morning and afternoon. It could even be some small group or one-on-one instructional points that become available based on some of the ways that we're going to juggle some aspects of the schedules as well. So in some ways, the IEP students could end up getting a lot more than they were getting definitely in the springtime, and go from there as well. But we're trying to meet those individual needs.
Okay. David Kemps. 6 Hunters Lane. My family is 100% against the governor's mandate that all students must wear face coverings at this time. I hope Tabernacle School District will abolish this stipulation as soon as possible. My family is 100% against the current Tabernacle School District reopening plan, specifically the number of days of in-classroom learning. How are Tabernacle students expected to complete their grades curriculum in such a small amount of time? Tabernacle's spring 2019 virtual education was unfulfilling and not satisfactory academically. I urge you to look at COVID numbers. Southern New Jersey is not and never has been a hotbed of virus activity. As of 8/2, per the Burlington County's website, Tabernacle has only had 35 positive cases. That leaves 99.5% who either have not had the virus or had no reason to get tested. In all of Burlington County, there have been roughly 34 COVID-related deaths for people under the age of 60. I do not know how many of these people had other health concerns. That corresponds a 99.99.2% survival rate. The youngest death in the entire county was just under 30 years old. Children and families who have health risks can stay home if they choose. Regular in-class learning should be available for everyone else. Other school districts in New Jersey are offering 5 days a week in school options. Please open Tabernacle schools every day, all day.
Again,
Okay.
as I mentioned before, just one quick thing. If you have not seen, on July 31st, there was even an article in the Burlington County Times and other papers as well that the Burlington County is now named an emerging hotspot. So that's something that obviously has to keep in mind on, and we have to react accordingly. So just because it is something that hasn't been here as strong as what Mr. Kemp's is implying doesn't mean it can't be. So I think we have to look into the advice of our health experts that are telling us to please make sure we're doing things that are following the guidance to put our students in the safest place, and students and staff in the safest place possible.
Toby, really?
I'm
Would you
here.
like me-
Yeah,
Okay,
because my questions have changed since I saw the plan.
right. I figured. Okay, go ahead.
So Toby Really, 14 Cuts Drive. I want to start. It makes me sad when I hear people say virtual learning wasn't a success. My experience was quite the opposite for the situation that we were in. I've said it multiple times. I think overnight, the school district was thrown into a situation that they had not anticipated. And I was extremely happy with how well my kids' teachers adapted, connected with them, checked in with them. There was one week we finally hit a spot and we thought we couldn't take it anymore. And that's when you guys implemented that Wednesday where it was like, and it just came at the exact time we needed it. So thank you, because I think it was a very difficult situation. And I think you handled it with grace and understanding, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
So my questions are, one, they changed because I saw your plan, which I would say to the board, it was very nice to see the plan ahead of time. So a lot of districts do that. They put it on their agenda so people can look at presentations ahead of time. I would suggest you consider that in the future. For buses, I guess my concern as a parent is how many kids are going to be on the bus? How many routes do they have to do? I mean, I know there's less kids per day, but how many routes are they going to have to do? Who's cleaning the buses in between, that kind of stuff. Another concern I have is it said visitors will be limited. I know, like, I was part of the HS, you know, PTA, HSI, whatever. I'm guessing all of that will be limited. People popping in, checking in, things like that. I just want to know about how that will be controlled. Can we change which cohort our kids are in, right? Like if it's done alphabetically, but that doesn't work for us, is that something you guys, or is that just like a hard decision? And I think that was it. I don't even remember what questions I wrote down, but I think most of the others were answered.
So you asked, the first question you asked, Mr. Early, was about the buses numbers.
Yep.
We are running the same routes that we have in previous years to try to further reduce the number of students that are on each route.
Okay.
Okay, that was one of our things we talked about. We didn't want to say, let's, decrease just because we're having half the students on a given day. And then we're in a situation where we're now putting the buses in a crowded situation. So they will have, approximately the same, about half the students on a route because we're dividing the students alphabetically in half, possibly even less than that when you factor in then the students that are choosing the full virtual option as well.
Okay.
The cleaning, that's going to be something that's going to be done with the bus drivers and our custodial crew. And as I mentioned as well, we have electrostatic sprayers that we're purchasing, which will be used as a full disinfectant mode for the buses in addition. And one of the things we're looking at trying to, again, similar to the buildings, try to put an additional point of emphasis in the high touch surfaces in the buildings, the railings, the seats, and so on, when it comes to cleaning and disinfecting of those areas. When it comes to visitors, we're trying to, when I say limit, it's like to non-existent levels, basically. We'll have to have some conversations, in particular, you mentioned the HSA in terms of how we can still work things out from them, because we still want to, work with them. There's still a benefit there, but it's going to really be very limited in terms of when they can come in. And as we mentioned before, a lot of things we're going to try to do is really utilize the things that people have become more accustomed to in terms of the Zooms, the Meets, etc., to have some of those meetings. So instead of it being, hey, we had to come in for a conference about your child's progress, we can send you a Zoom link and we can have those conversations that way. Really trying to make sure the people that are in the buildings are the students, or the staff, to make it as clean and safe for them as possible. When it comes to, you need to drop off and item for your child outside of school, it'll be done outside, not even in the vestibule. We're gonna have something outside, you leave it there, that's it. We really want to make sure that our buildings we know who's in them. We're controlling it that way, and going from there. So obviously it would be, if a kid, even for a case of a parent to the nurse, we want to make sure it's we know who's coming. People are not going to be allowed to show up and say, I'm here to see so-and-so. It really will be truly, I'm sorry, you have to have an appointment. We have to have a real reason behind it. Again, that goes down to the safety and security of the students and the staff, that we're keeping that building that clean. You also asked about the alphabetical cohorts. That would have to be looked at really on a case-by-case basis, because some of those numbers are very tight, and we're looking in terms of the limitation of the class sizes themselves. So the large majority, just so you understand, of our classes, when we socially distance the desks, most rooms are then capped at 12 students on a given day. Okay. Some rooms are a little bit larger, so that number can be more, but so that's the number. So if the alphabet doesn't work out, we'd have to really have a conversation. It may require a full change in schedule for the student almost, just to make it work, if that makes sense. Again, as I mentioned before, one of the things is, especially when it comes to 6-8, even though we know they're going to be moving, we're trying the best we can to still have those students. They may move, but it might be with the same 12 kids. Does that make sense? So that's why we really have to have a conversation if it's something that we could work out for the individual.
Okay. I think I had one other question I forgot to ask. In between, for middle school, in between classes, it said that there'd be cleaning because they're moving. Who's doing the cleaning of all of those classrooms between every?
So again, it's not cleaning of all classrooms. From the conversations I've had with other districts, what most people are looking to do is to get wipes in the classes that we then give to a student to clean your individualized desk, and then leave that way. Again, making sure that you're keeping that area clean, because your kids are not really going to be walking around touching everything else in the room.
Right.
That way you're really just sanitizing the space the individual students are using.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the last, no, I think there's two more written in questions. From Erica Reilly. I don't have her address, but is she there, Erica? Okay, I'm going to read it. It says, what date will parents choose from the options that the district is offering? And what date will parents be advised that their chosen option is granted?
Well, we're looking as of right now, as next Friday, as I think I mentioned before, would be the date we're going to hopefully have the survey out to the families for anyone who wants to make that finalized decision. But we're trying to make it as quick as we can, that we can set everything up. As I mentioned, one of the big things that people are choosing remote is to make sure that we can get people the devices, that way they can start the school year and have everything they need on them as well.
Okay. Then the last one I have is from Jen Lee. I don't have her address either. Is she here? Okay, I'm going to read it. I know during the July 20th meeting, Mr. Diltz inquired about the approval of the passenger bus for $93,706. As I understand it, the bus has been on the agenda for a while, but is this bus purchase absolutely necessary this year? Is there a bus that is being decommissioned? I would hate to have a bus purchased. We go back into virtual learning only and the bus sits in the lot and depreciates. While I understand the two charts options that were distributed in the earlier emails. I think the parents should have been surveyed differently so that there is data showing you the percentage that actually wants to return to school or who are planning on sending their kids to school. Again, perhaps if we had that information, maybe we wouldn't need as many buses to bus the kids that aren't attending. Additionally, I'm sure many of you have seen the recommendations from the CDC for schools reopening below. I have heard many parents asking the same question: how can we cram kids into one building during a pandemic when our goal is to spread out and have more room? I think you really have to address the issue with attendees on Monday night, as I hear so many parents asking that question. I feel that it is short-sighted to move everything to the middle school
And a speaker.
in the midst of a pandemic. I think that's it for the questions.
Patty, did you want to address the bus situation, or you want me to talk on that one?
I mean, it's up to you. It's fine. The one thing that we, in review, I'm sorry, hold on one second. I have it here. We do have some buses that are getting ready to retire that we have to keep in the rotation so that when we are back in full gear that we have them. And remember that we are going to have, we use buses for sports, for field trips. And we have to have a significant number of buses that we use for regular business that are in our lot now for breakdowns. We have to make sure, because of the cleaning situation, that we have enough of our supply that we normally use in the regular course of business, so that we have the ability to make a determination or a change on a split-second notice.
Going back to Patty's point too, she mentioned the situation. If we end up having the health department say that a bus itself was the site of a contagion, we'd have to close down that bus and put a backup bus in delay. So we're trying to make sure we have as many options as possible. And again, we're not decreasing our routes this year. We are trying, that way we can limit the number of people on the buses as well.
Okay, that's what I have for written in questions. Does anybody else have any questions? Please raise your hand. Can you see anybody? Jason?
Yes, Mr. Crilly and Ms. Grosser and Ms. Voss all have their hands up.
Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Curley.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Earlier today, the 28th Lane, Tom Curley, 28th Lane, but I'm also a teacher speaking for the association today. Earlier today, the Education Association sent a letter to the Board of Ed in regards to the restart and recovery plan. We'd like to read it here now so it can be on the record. Over the past few months, administration, staff, and community members have been working together discussing ways to safely reopen the school buildings for students and staff. Countless volunteer hours have been and continue to be spent meeting with various committees comprised of all stakeholders. While we understand that Mr. Bannon has to take into account all opinions, at this time we feel it's important that you had the recommendations from the committee members that are not yet reflected in the current plan. The reopening committee members have supported the current plan of a 4-hour day and the use of pre-recorded videos by staff in classrooms since day one when it was proposed to those committees. Both of these proposed points will allow us to serve the students regardless of families' choice of in-person or virtual learning while protecting the privacy and confidentiality of the staff and students. TEA completed an anonymous survey, and we'd like to share some of those results as they pertain to tonight's plan. It should be noted that according to our survey, 76.9% overall and 82% of our instructional staff felt that a rotating A-B schedule was the best schedule to educationally meet the needs of our classroom. It would provide a more consistent basis for running a flipped classroom as being proposed tonight. In addition, the survey conducted showed that 72% of the staff felt that 1 time per month should be the maximum amount of time families should be able to change their decision from virtual to hybrid learning, with 85% of the instructional staff preferring no more than once a month as well. And we absolutely understand and agree with Mr. Bannon in regards to certain situations having to dictate different ideas. We realize that you, the board, have a tremendous weight on your shoulders as you vote for the plan in September. The decision and direction that you choose for Tabernacle Schools has the potential to affect the Tabernacle community in ways beyond what an educational institution is accustomed to. We acknowledge that no plan will be perfect or satisfy each individual's request, but we assure you that our TEA members will work to the best of our abilities to keep the students in Tabernacle safe, happy, and learning. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. More comments?
I think Ms. Grosser was the next person with her hand raised.
Sue?
Actually, Jeff Grosser. I'm on my.
Oh, Jeff.
Thanks. I want to thank the Board of Education. I know this is a really difficult decision to make, and I'm trying to figure this out. There's a lot of different.
I'm sorry. Could I have your address, please?
Yeah, Jeff Grosser, 35 Fox Hill Drive.
Thank you. Thank you.
So just two questions for the Board of Education. Again, thanks for your time. The first is the New Jersey Department of Health still hasn't released their guidance for districts to follow with regards to determining how to bring students back to school safely. And I know because I work for one of them, but many health departments, including Burlington's, are doing their best to kind of guess what that guidance is going to be. So what factors outside of low case counts in Tabernacle and Burlington County are leading us to believe that the A and B schedule is the best way to restart? That's my first question, and then I'll wrap up with the second question, then I'll sign off for you guys to answer. But the other question is, what conversations has the Board of Ed or administration had with the Burlington County Health Department in establishing criteria, either number of cases among students or number of cases among staff or faculty, or community positivity rate that would trigger changes in this instructional plan? And if so, if those conversations have been had, could those details on those discussions be shared with parents? Because right now, the plan is to follow, from what I understand, camp and childcare guidance for isolation and quarantine. And if that's the case, if you have a symptomatic student with COVID-like symptoms, they're going to be asked to be out of school for 1 to 2 weeks. So, it's just something to think about. So again, just some thoughts, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jeff, I'll answer your question first about the scheduling model. So far, one of the things to remember is in terms of bringing students back or not, the Department of Education, releasing their roadback plan, said that it's mandated that schools have to offer in-person instruction at this point in time. Now, ultimately, as we've seen, that the governor in a moment's notice can make changes and make us go to full remote, wherever the case may be. But however, even if that happens before September, this plan then could be implemented when that is enabled. So right now, we're under the understanding that come September 8th, students will be able to return, and this is the model we have. But if anything changes from his office or from the Department of Health in their county, then we obviously would adjust and go to a full remote if that case may be too. And in terms of your question, in terms of any sort of rates, positivity, and so on, we've had some conversations with the Department of Health, as I mentioned before. We've asked them for more specific guidance. I am told to expect it. But I've been asking for it. We've been asking for it for a couple of weeks now. And like you mentioned some specific rate numbers and stuff like that. That's something that has not been given to us yet. Those are some of the questions we've asked. Would it be something that based on the county level, would they shut down the county again? If you remember, our county was one of the first ones that Dr. Conaway in March shut down the county as a whole. I know some places are shutting down individual schools. So he has been really responsive in that matter. So again, I don't want to speak for him, but I would be kind of expect almost that it would be a similar type of situation since he did that procedure in the springtime as well.
And I know, just real quick, I know the governor released guidance that allowed the remote learning option July 20th. And again, there's so many moving parts. A lot of this hasn't been released. So I appreciate your flexibility, and whatever I can offer you guys, I'm happy to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Ray Voss.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this board meeting. I'm very appreciative to the school in how effectively they shifted to remote learning in the spring. And I just want to say that I know it wasn't the experience for a lot of other parents in other districts, or even in our district, to have the consistency that my kids had with Miss Janicki and Miss Lane with my son in first grade, and with Miss Raleigh and Deanie with my daughter in fourth. So I'm just very grateful to the school for, how much they put into remote learning. What I'd like to say, and I guess my biggest concern is it's moving into this platform where the teachers will be teaching for a half day, 5 days a week with kids in the class, and then we'll be also having to be available for remote in-person education for those students who are home, as well as creating lesson plans and virtual content, Google Classroom, Zoom meetings, all of the things that I really would expect in a remote a remote school environment for my kids to have access to. How are the teachers going to have the planning time and the capability of being able to juggle all of those things without having either a dedicated office day or a remote day? Have you thought about that, and how would you all address that moving forward?
So that's a part of the plan that we've actually been working a lot on too, is trying to have some of the common planning time. For K-5, we'll have common planning time some during the day. We're trying to see if there's a way for us to get some more of that for 6-8 during. It might only be available after. Obviously, 6-week schedule is a very different animal, so to speak, than the K-5 allotment. But it's something that Mrs. Gallagher and I have worked on very hard to try to find more time for those planning sessions, and putting more tools and ways to spread out a little bit more. Like I mentioned before, one of the things we've had a lot of conversations about is that not necessarily people shouldn't look at just because they are, I'll use 6-8 as an example. Let's say I am the primary 6th grade. I have 3 6th grade ELA classes, right? But I have 1 7th grade. Well, maybe that person who has the 3 7th grade classes, and they have the 1 6th, if I was able to take some of their film videos, put them online, and then I could share them the 6th, we can balance that out to try to take a little bit of work off my plate. And again, there's no reason we couldn't still do that. It could provide more consistency across the grade level that way too. As I mentioned before, we're trying to do the same type of thing with the elementary grades too, and balancing things out that way. So we're trying to find some more ways to kind of take some things off the plate if we can, knowing how much additional is kind of put on, because as you mentioned, it is a different situation. We're talking about teaching the in-person instruction and the hybrid and remote as well.
Ms. Voss, could you let me know your address, please?
Yes, 201 Schuyler Court. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Jack has his hand up.
Who?
Jack doesn't have
Jack?
a lot.
Jack Cronenberger, 51 Sleepy Hollow Drive. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Thank you all for your extraordinary work in this. I can't imagine how daunting this must be. Although I do mirror Mr. Kemp's comments about the fact that, we've been very, very fortunate to be almost isolated from the disease altogether here in Tabernacle, with less than 0.5% having any effect at all, and that's been since March. So it's extraordinary what's being done here in order to try to protect the children from a disease that really doesn't exist in our town. I understand we have to be careful, but this is truly extraordinary. So I have a couple questions after my comment there. And my first question is, when a child shows symptoms, what is going to be considered a symptom?
So I'll answer that one first. Again, the symptom comes from the list that's given to us from the CDC and Department of Health that they're saying are symptoms of COVID. One of the things they've mentioned too is that quite often it's not just a single symptom. It was actually very interesting and enlightening when I was talking to them when they presented something to us, because they said, think about New Jersey. We have a lot of people that, especially come fall, their allergies are going to start acting up. And one of the signs and symptoms that's listed right now in COVID is the idea that you could have a runny nose or sneezing. Well, you could be allergies right now. So they said, obviously it's not just, unless they said the symptom that kind of jumps to the top is that high fever. Everything else is really more of a multi-symptom type of thing. When you say, okay, this person's sneezing and they have this, then okay, fine. Then let's see if we can, it's better to be safe than sorry. Beyond that, it's like I said, going back to just using the list of symptoms that come out from the CDC that the Department of Education, Department of Health have issued to us as well.
So my follow-up question would be, and I appreciate your answer, but would it be, so if a child sneezes, are they issued out and they're taken down to the isolation room to be checked out?
No, like I said, it goes back to multi-symptoms. We have multi-symptoms from that. And we're putting a protocol in place. Because again, one of the big things that happened in the past, a kid's looking like they might be sick. You'd say, hey, Johnny, would you mind going? You got to go to the nurse's office. You don't look so well. But now we're creating another way that the nurses will be notified and try to triage the student, so to speak, and then make the determination before that student is then placed directly into the isolation room, and try to protect it the best way possible.
Gotcha.
And again, a lot
Okay.
of conversations too, just so you know, I'm sorry, to cut you
No,
off. I'm not remiss in throwing this one out. Our nurses, and actually all county nurses, were invited to a session with the Department of Health, or our health department in our own county, to get more guidance from them, since a lot of the contact that's going to happen is directly from our nurses in terms of the contact tracing and things like that, so they can better understand the protocols. And once we get, as I know Mr. Gross asked earlier, a full, FAQ, so to speak, or directions from our own county's health department, that will obviously go with the nurses. And if we have to make modifications to our plans based on the county's recommendation, that something will happen. It's one of the things that it's a little difficult in our state, unfortunately, in that some counties have released their plans directly to their schools. We just are not one of those counties that have had it yet. And there is some there's some differences and discrepancies depending on the counties, as you mentioned as well. Some different counties have different levels and rates, so therefore their departments of health are reacting a little bit differently. So we kind of have to hold back on some things until we see specifically what our health department's recommendations are going to be, and then adjust accordingly.
All right, so you're kind of flying blind to some degree, obviously, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, the government could come out tomorrow and say virtual learning for the whole state. Who knows, right?
Unfortunately, we do have to have that, and as we talk a lot about, our terminology we're using is pivot points. We have to be ready on a moment's notice. If it's a full remote, okay, then here's how we can react and put this plan in place. If it's the hybrid, here's what we can do. If they come out tomorrow and they say, hey, we got great news, we got a vaccine and everyone's going to get it, okay, here's how we can pivot and go back to the full way it was before. So we've had a lot of conversations about that, and trying to be responsive and be able to really adjust and adapt almost at a moment's notice. And that's one of the things, like literally, as you mentioned, we had the whole thing that came on Monday. So right away, okay, let's make sure we had changed our entire plan, and any section of our thing that talked about the old terminology that the state issued have to come out. Let's make sure we're being compliant along that way.
Right. Well, I'm sure there's one thing we're all in agreement in, and that's this ends sooner than later, because it's been certainly the most crazy thing of all of our lives, I'm sure. And thank you again.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I have a question, but my hand isn't working, so.
Hi, Mary Graham.
Hi, Mary Graham, 458 Medford Lakes Road. I just wanted to say thank you again for all the hard work you guys have been doing. I have many family members that are teachers and in your area, and it's been rough, so I appreciate it. Just two quick questions. You had stated that we can switch back, let's say in October, and change our mind. Can we do the same thing with the buses? Right now, I'm gonna, probably take my son to school, but if things get better, can we switch him and put him on the bus later down the line?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then the second question is, when all this is done, COVID's over, it's passed, it's January, are you guys going to be ready with the middle school to have everyone go back full time, or is that kind of, we're playing it by ear?
No, we would be ready if we were able to have that type of restriction. The biggest thing is obviously we'd have to have some time to put some furniture back in place. As mentioned, one of the things we've done is we've pulled a lot out to create as much space as possible for students in the room, and making sure we can space out their desks and that mandate social distancing. So some of the things that have been in the past were more collaborative seating models of kidney-shaped tables, round tables, and this for different reading groups and stuff like that. We've had to pull all that out. The things that have been in the past, these are the best practices of let's do these groups in small cycles, and going back to really, it's you walk in, you saw the picture we had in our presentation. It's the straight rows. It's the students all facing the same direction. It's very spread apart. It is not what school has looked like the past years. It's really kind of gone back that way. And again, so the biggest thing, if it came down to and everything worked out, and hey, come this time, we would just need to have some time to make sure we got the furniture back. We're not throwing anything out. Don't trust me on that one. But it's just a matter of being able to put everything back and enable the rooms to look more like the rooms that our students and our teachers and our families have been accustomed to.
So no hold up with the transition, putting the second through fifth grade in middle school. That won't hold anything up, right?
No, they'll be in the middle school starting this year. come September. So all those rooms will be pre-established. Just like I said, the biggest thing is the furniture.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I appreciate you
Sure.
guys.
Thank you. Hands?
I don't know. This is Toby, really. Am I allowed to ask another question? I don't know the rules.
Well, if there's no other hands.
We do have 2 more hands.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. There's a Jackie Tomasetti, I think was the first one I saw.
Hi, I was just wondering, are the teachers going to be in the school the full day, even though they're teaching students half day?
Yes, our plan is to have their staff in our building the full day.
So the students that are learning at home on those days, are they supposed to be learning while the teacher's in school, or is she going to help the students at home in the afternoon when she doesn't have the class?
Both.
Both. Okay.
I said that's part of the, as Mrs. Gallagher mentioned, the idea of the flipped classroom model. So some of those things will be posted online. Kids will go on, and then they'll be able to touch base with the teacher when that teacher is available. Some teachers, and we're trying to, as I mentioned before, try to see if we can create some ability or availability, I should say, for people to interact. Because one of the big things we found out from people in the fall, or the spring, I should say, some people love the flexibility of, hey, like my kid can check in these times. But one of the things that was also tough for us is, in terms of, we might not have our full attendance known until the end of the day. So we want to make sure we're having students check in and create that schedule for families that, if a kid is in school or a kid is out of school, that child still knows, here's the time my day begins. Here's the things I really should be working on during this time. And if we can create those additional touch points throughout the day, that's one of the big things we're trying to work on now.
So will the workload be the same for the kids at home that are in school? Like it's kind of like half days all around?
It'll be a little bit different because, again, you got to realize that some of those things that the child might be doing when they're home, they're not going to be, they're not the same level. You're not going to be sitting in, here's your class time only. And it's a little bit different that way. But again, we're trying to at least have that availability for that child to check in the morning. Here's some additional points in time. Some of it may not be required check-ins throughout the day, but it could be, as we've talked a lot about, trying to discuss things in terms of like office hours type of idea, that, if you needed help in math, and you check in at 9 o'clock, there could be a math teacher available. If you need, it might not be your teacher, but it could be a math teacher, if that makes sense. So just trying to create some additional supports for the students.
Okay, and my last question, are they going to revise the school supply list? Because obviously we're not going to send in like masses of pencils and stuff.
Absolutely, it's a good question. The one thing I don't want to speak incorrectly on this one, but I believe a lot of those class lists were sent to a company that for people to buy outside of. I don't know if we can make those adjustments anymore, because I know we had to get those lists to them, I think, early spring. So some of that may not. You're entirely right that some of that's a little bit different, because I looked at some of those lists in the past week. I know we even talked about community uses of supplies, and that's obviously not something we're trying to do this year. So certainly that doesn't necessarily mean that the individual parents might not need those, but I'm pretty sure some of those things were already taken care of in order from the outside vendor as well.
Ms. Tomasetti, may I have your address, please?
Yeah, 90 Richter Road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see a Danielle with her hand up. Green Bay Packers. So got her hand up.
Still has a hand up, but not responding.
Yeah, okay. We'll come back to her if her hand still remains up. I see more hands are up.
We're going to do, I think the next one that went up was Kyle.
Okay.
Hi.
Kyle?
Hi. It's actually Sandra Talent. I'm on Christina's phone.
I'm sorry, can you say your name again?
It's Sandra Talent from 7 Forest Lane.
Thank you.
I don't know if you spoke about this earlier, but my question is about the ventilation system in the schools. Being that it's an airborne virus, is there anything that they have done as far as installing HEPA filters or anything else to filter the air while the students are in school?
So actually, it's interesting. I had a long conversation with our facilities manager about that. And one of the recommendations is actually, because of the way our filtration system is recommended by the managers, is not to put the HEPA filters in, because that actually would reduce the ventilation and actually keep the contagion in the rooms, because it would reduce the airflow. So the airflow, according to everything that they have told us, and he has verified as well, is that our systems really are running at a very good rate that would keep the airflow moving, and keep the contagion from being and getting them out of the building as quickly as possible. And the HEPA, as mentioned, the HEPA filter would actually, unfortunately, do damage to that.
Okay, and there's no other like personal systems in the classrooms that would, like a system separate for each classroom?
No, to my knowledge, the system we have in place, as you said, is excellent. Is running as it should be okay. And again, like we mentioned, if there ever is an issue, if the outside, the windows can. That's one that comes back to the Department of Education's roadback talks a lot about opening doors, opening windows, but there can be issues with that in terms of ours that would actually negate some of the flow with the ventilation system, and present some other issues too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have about 9 more minutes for questions. I do see a couple more hands up, several more hands up, so.
This is
3
Terry
minutes.
Wiggins. I don't know how to raise my hand. It's not working, but I do have a question.
Okay.
Again, thank you for everything that you've done for the Board of Ed and the school as well. For basic skills students who go outside the classroom for reading and math, I know the plan for K through 5 is to keep them in a single classroom. What are we doing to compensate for those students who need to have those additional learning?
Great question, Ms. Wiggins. That's a specialized situation, similar to if a student was in a pull-out reading situation for special education. So there could be some situations where a pull-out is there. So when I meant that the students are staying static, it's for the most part, but there could be certain things in terms of BSI, IEP needs, speech, OT, PT that could require a student to leave the location.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Ms. Wiggins, may I have your address, please?
It's 155 Powell Place Road.
Thank you.
I think Katie was the next one up, Meg.
Okay, Katie? Kate, you there?
I think she dropped off. So,
Hi, sorry.
oh, okay.
Mrs. Wiggins. Sorry. Hi, it's Kate Smith, 32 Foxhole Drive. Mrs. Wiggins just answered my question.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Kate.
It was about the children with that were getting pulled out for special education, speech, occupational therapy, PT, but it was already answered. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Tom Curley?
Hi, sorry about that. This one will be a quick one, but I'm going to piggyback on a previous question regarding the air filtration. Do we know, and you may not have that answer right now, but it might be good to put on our website. Do you know the MERV rating of our air filtration systems at all offhand? As we know, you may know or may not know, but 13 is what will filter viruses and bacteria and carriers.
I'm sorry, Tom. That's
Yeah.
something that I know offhand, but that's something that we could talk to Mr. Higginbotham about.
Thank you.
Leah Haas had her hand up. I think it hasn't spoken yet.
Yes, good evening. How are you? Leah Haas, 211 Oak Lane. Children that have a 504 plan, will these plans be discussed with their new teachers to ensure these children have the proper setup and accommodations in the classroom the days they are in class?
Always. That's a legal mandate. So we still have to adhere to all those things. Nothing's changed in the state's plans in terms of the things that are legally required of the schools. It's just more has been added on, not necessarily less.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Mrs. Reilly, it looks like our last hand up.
I just have a question about, so the social emotional piece you spoke on. I have my youngest will be in 3rd grade, but he asked me a question and he said, what happens if I fall and get hurt? Can my teacher not hug me anymore? Like, what if I'm sad? That kind of stuff. And I know kids will be dealing with that, younger kids. So I know teachers will work their best to figure that out, but what kind of supports are you giving the staff too? Because this amount of stress on them to see kids going through this and then worrying about this kid doesn't have his mask on, or how do I handle this? It's like a new level of just not just teaching. And so I'm worried about like what supports are there for the kids, but also what supports are there for the teachers. One, because I care about the teachers, but two, the amount of stress that's on them filters down as well. And so I'm just worried about that situation.
That's one of the things we're trying to do, and it actually is one of our goals, is that the board will kind of discuss in the coming months as well in terms of social emotional learning this year. And one of the things we're trying to do is create professional development opportunities for the staff when they come back to school in terms of how they can best help the students, but also themselves. As you mentioned, it's a very well taken. That obviously our staff has dealt with an awful lot too. We want to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and we're helping to take care of them too. One of the things we've also looked at in terms of PPE as well to try to help the students is we're looking into the masks that are not just the covered masks that most people are wearing, but really trying to get the masks that have the visible mouth. We want to make sure that students, not just for the language acquisition skills of them being able to see people as they're forming words and help them there, but also to see the face, to see the smiles. It's one of the things that I think is the hardest right now when you're looking at these masks, these cloth masks on a day-to-day basis. We as adults see, you can see someone smiling by their cheekbones raising and things like that in their faces. These kids don't necessarily know to look for that yet. And that's one of the things we really want to make sure that we're trying to talk to a few different vendors to find out what the best thing we can do to get those masks, to put them in the hands of our teachers so our kids can see those faces too. And they can see that, the smiles and everything else that's going on. I think that's very important too.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other hands? I want to thank everybody for keeping it under the hour. That was very good. I hope everybody got their answers to the questions, but if you didn't, I just want to reiterate that you can always send us your questions via email. Send it to Sean. As you can tell, he knows this plan inside, outside, upside down. He can answer any question you have, and if he can't, he knows where to find the answers. So thank you again for all your questions. I hope this makes it clear for everybody. Well, at least for today, always could change tomorrow and then we're at it again. But I want to thank everybody for their questions. And I'm going to continue on, since we don't have any more hands, I'm going to continue on with education and technology. We have one item under education and technology.
So moved. Megan Jones.
Second, Vicki. We have any questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you again to the administration, all of the staff members and parents who volunteered, and board members. It really only comes together when you have so many people who are putting the children first. And that's what I saw in all of our meetings. And I'm so appreciative of that. And as Meg mentioned before, please understand that these are all subject to change by the Department of Health and Department of Education. This is what we know as of today. And if it has to change, we will have to change it just to kind of keep in compliance.
Okay, Sean, this is the one we spoke about earlier, correct?
Yeah, so speaking of things that change, excellent segue there, Dr. Jones. Today we got the FAQ that came out from the state. And one of the things that came out from them is the statement that basically boards there's nothing that says that boards have to approve the plan. Right. And the understanding behind that is that if we look here later on our policy, we have the policies that include multiple sections from the plan that are on there explicitly stated. And the interpretation, at least I have so far, is the reason why that the Department of Ed is clarifying that is they understand that things happen incredibly quickly. And therefore the plans themselves may have to be modified before a Board of Education meeting enables that approval. So it was interesting that they actually have in their FAQ sheet, and it was, sorry, I just want to make sure I pull up their exact wording because it was very interesting how they said it, is that local boards in education should still contact their board attorney about approval of calendars, hours, safety protocols, and policies, which we have our policies that are being in there. But it says that there's nothing in terms of requiring the Board of Education themselves or the district actually have a formalized approval of the plan.
So my question is, if we approve this tonight and it changes tomorrow, then we have to approve. It's like setting a precedent. We would like to change it, not that we approve of the township district restart and recovery, but that we acknowledge. Correct?
I think that at least enables us to have that, and we would obviously change the policies. And again, the policies that are coming up later.
Right. Policies are different than this plan.
Exactly.
So we'd have to make a motion to change the original thing. So I make a motion that we acknowledge, see, the board restart and recovery plan.
Exactly.
Would someone like to second me?
I second the motion, Vicky.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I set that up good for you, right?
That was good. That was very good. Roll call.
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Thank you. Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you.
Under human resources.
Meg, hold on a second.
Sorry.
So that was to just to make sure we're checking all the boxes here. That was to change it. So now we need to vote on the changed one too, don't we? Separately.
Yes.
Okay.
So I now make a motion
Okay.
that we approve the changed language, that we acknowledge the restart and recovery plan.
Second, Vicky.
Thank you. Thank you. Roll call. Any questions or comments? Everybody understood that, right? Yeah, I didn't either. Go ahead. Roll call.
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody good with that one now? Awesome. Human resources. We have 1 through 4.
So moved, Vicky.
Vicky
Gail.
and Gail. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCloy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you.
Was there anything under operations committee? I know Mr. Lepsis isn't here tonight. Sean, do we have anything to cover with that?
That's my knowledge.
Okay. Policy, Dr. McCloy?
So
We have
moved.
one item under first reading.
I have a question.
All right, so Kevin did the first. I'll do the second so that Steve can ask his question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Policy is McCloy and Jones. Okay. Now this is the policy. So any comments or questions?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. One, the policy, as far as the spelling out mask wear, I think it conflicts with current guidance right now. So as this policy, as the state comes out and changes things and makes this policy null and void in certain areas, how are we going to adapt to that?
There was an updated one, Steve. The policy has now been updated to reflect all the new changes.
Does it reflect, okay, so the policy, does it address people that go out of state to the 35 states that are in the hot zone, and how they're going to, do they have to notify, the parents have to notify us that a child was
Oh, you meant
in those states?
Sorry, I thought you meant in terms of the mask wearing. You meant
That, I was that too. I'm talking about the constant evolution that we have every Monday, every day at 1 o'clock when the governor gets on the TV and says, this is what we're going to do today.
some pieces, obviously, we may have to make adjustments by the time we do the second reading.
Okay. So what's our go ahead though, as far as once we finally vote on this policy and it conflicts with state guidance?
We may have to then put the caveat in there of, just this refer to guidance issued from such and such to create just that open phrase. That way we're not constantly changing the policy itself, if that would be easier.
All right, good. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Roll call?
Mrs. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Dilks?
Yes.
Colonel Hensky?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. McCoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Any miscellaneous?
Me.
Go ahead, Vicky.
I don't know if this was something, Sean, that you did, or I had seen on Facebook from another friend who has children in another school district. There is a website called mask.com where you can go on to the website and purchase masks for $1.50 each for your schools. And both of our schools are listed on there. So if you, I don't know if you want to put it out that, you know, the schools would then receive their masks. There are masks that are being made by the, I believe it's the Hanes, Hanes, the Hanes, I guess, underwear company. And they're washable masks. So I don't know if.
You say there's masks with an S?
Masks, masks.com.
Okay.
And you can look up your school, and both schools are there.
So donate washable and reusable
Yeah,
Hanes
and-
masks to your local school for only $1.50 per mask.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Anything else for miscellaneous? Okay. I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. The highest count I saw was 132 people. That's pretty good. Remember, any questions, please feel free to email us. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah, Brian's not here. Who's going to fill his spot?
I did, Vicky.
We got Vicky and
Second.
Hensky. Awesome. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? All abstain? Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night. Good job, Sean. Good job, Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
job, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.